The following video contains spoilers for all of One Piece. Alright, so I've been a fan of One Piece for a while now, and as someone who views this series as highly as I do, I feel like it's my due diligence to put as many people on as humanly possible. I've recommended it to friends, I'm active on forums, I even made a whole YouTube video about it. For me, there's just something uniquely satisfying watching other people experience this for the first time, and going through all those same emotional moments that I did. It's one of my favorite things about being in this community. But what's interesting about that is when I'm on these places like Twitter or Reddit or YouTube, there's a certain type of question these new viewers like to ask that makes no sense to me. Those being questions about skipping arcs. Now, I'm not talking about skipping filler or even suggestions for fan edits like One Piece in order to condense this at times very bloated series. I'm actually in full support of this. What I'm talking about are the people who ask to skip entire canon arcs. Oh, what arc should I skip? I heard Skypiea was boring. Can I skip it? Can I just watch Marineford by itself? What are we doing? Now, this isn't going to be a video talking about why you shouldn't skip any arcs in One Piece, even though you shouldn't. There's actually a great video about this exact topic by a YouTuber named Bejesus that I'll link in the description. What I want to focus on instead is an arc that I've seen in these kind of posts pretty regularly. That being Thriller Bark. Now, is Thriller Bark the best arc in One Piece? No, not even close. But to see the amount of disrespect I've seen thrown its way has led me to the conclusion that this is the most underappreciated arc in the series. You see, Thriller Bark is in a very unfortunate spot in the One Piece canon, being that it's a good arc sandwiched right in between two of the very best in the series, Enies Lobby and Sabaody. So the reason people want to skip this arc isn't necessarily for a lack of quality, but more so out of eagerness to watch the better storylines. But a huge reason for these arcs being as good as they are is because of the events that happen in Thriller Bark. What do I mean by that? We'll take a look at Sabaody. The defining moment in that arc, and arguably the defining moment in all of pre-time skip One Piece, is Kuma separating the crew. The moment itself is obviously heartbreaking, but it's the hundreds of episodes prior getting to know and bond with the crew that elevates its impact to an even higher level. Every single Straw Hat up to this point has had a compelling backstory. They've had their individual moments of excellence. They've had substantial time to familiarize themselves to us and grow into their roles in the crew. A storyline like Thriller Bark and its focus leaning towards character interaction is perfect for preceding a moment like this. A fun calm before the storm that serves as an outlet to continue the crew's bond with one another, especially among some of the newer members. I've mentioned before in my One Piece recommendation video that there's a certain charm to these kind of arcs that give this series character. And I feel like we get too fixated on this series' highest highs to the point where we devalue these more lighthearted adventures. Because what Thriller Bark may lack in sheer intensity, it makes up for it in so many different ways. A primary one being theming. When people say that One Piece has great world building, they're not just talking about the amount of locations we get to visit. They're also talking about its ability to make all of these places feel distinct to this series, no matter how outlandish they may seem on the surface. And Thriller Bark might be the best example of this. I absolutely adore this ship's gothic aesthetic and the love it has for all things horror. There are influences here from all different types of literature, film, poetry, and music that all combine into this unique melting pot that feels distinctly One Piece. There's a scene where we see a group of zombies dancing in a nightclub that's a direct nod to the Thriller video by Michael Jackson. Sindri, the stage actress that Hogback brought back to life, was based in large part by the Japanese ghost story Banchao Sarayashiki, or Okiku and the Nine Plates. So if you were curious as to why she keeps breaking plates and hates them with a passion, it has roots in that story. Maybe the biggest source of inspiration Oda took for this arc comes from none other than The Nightmare Before Christmas. This is most apparent in the character design for Brook and the resemblance to Jack Skellington, both being tall skeletons that sing. But even going beyond that, it has roots in many different subtle aspects about this arc, specifically the relationship between Hogback and Sindri and Dr. Finkelstein and Sally. Both have genius mad scientists who bring life to these young women in order to control them to do their will. Both women are subjects to abuse by the hands of their creator and desperately yearn for freedom. But what's interesting is that Finkelstein's motivations for control are very paternalistic, whereas Hogback, he's just a hornball. That's kind of a theme in this arc. Obviously, you have all of the standard creatures we've come to associate with this genre, your ghosts, your skeletons, vampires, zombies, but even they're presented in a way that differentiates them from any other adaptation and into something that only this series can create. Thriller Bark never feels like just the Straw Hats visiting a haunted house. There's a real personality that permeates through every inch of this place, and that has everything to do with the humor.
うんこは出ますよ。
Ironically, it's the arc set in a graveyard that's by far the funniest. It's the perfect contrast. You can say what you will about Thriller Bark, but the one thing that's undeniable is how consistently funny it is from the jump. From the moment we land on this ship, it is just hit after hit comedically. The scene where Luffy walks up to that zombie and just calmly pushes him back into his grave is one of the most unexpected and well executed gags I have ever seen. You have Luffy chasing down a unicorn and Tree drinking tea, Frankie building a perfect bridge from nothing then complaining about its design, Robin refusing to join the Straw Hats' makeshift mech. I'm still a sucker for all of the skeleton puns Brook makes, but they are at their peak right here. Even the way the group splits up and having Usopp, Nami, and Chopper go on their own separate adventures adds to this. It's a really entertaining dynamic watching them cower in fear upon every single sight compared to the rest of the Straw Hats handling them like it's nothing. I feel like too many times with horror comedies, they tend to rely on parody as the source of their humor, and poking fun at all the various stereotypes within the horror genre. With Thriller Bark, the humor comes primarily from character interactions, which is what makes it one of my favorite arcs with the crew as an ensemble. I mentioned before how this arc is the perfect calm before the storm to Sabaody, and this is why. You have to understand that prior to Thriller Bark, we're still missing an entire member of the crew, and even though Frankie has been around since Water 7, he's still technically brand new up to this point. Usopp just rejoined the crew after his fight with Luffy, and Robin had her own moment of awakening during her I Wanna Live cry. These characters have been through a lot, and for as important as these moments are in solidifying the crew's bond emotionally, a saga like Thriller Bark is important for humanizing them. It shows the audience that at the end of the day, this is a group of close friends who love to laugh, sing, and have fun with each other despite all of the chaos around them. Their bond is as close in Thriller Bark as it ever has been in the series. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the nothing happened scene, where both Zoro and Sanji are willing to take their captain's pain he endured, but obviously Zoro takes one for the team. I mean, you could write a book on how well this scene tackles camaraderie, loyalty, strength, and self-sacrifice. Brook has one of the saddest backstories in the series, but I feel like his cry towards the end of this arc saying he's truly glad to be alive after joining the crew is just as heart-wrenching and not nearly talked about enough. The fight with Oars at the end of this arc is one of the few times where we get to see all of the Straw Hats defeat the big bad together, and it's such a joy to see each member use their individual techniques in combination with each other. I understand that Luffy is the main character and he deserves to be the one to handle the main antagonist by himself, but I really wish Oda would take notes from this scene and implement more team fights into this series because they are executed so well. I don't think Mora and his crew are anything special as villains. They're a little bit too cartoony and over the top for my taste, which fits the theming for this arc but doesn't really leave much of an impression compared to Doflamingo or Kaido. However, one thing I do find interesting about this crew is how they're presented in comparison to the Straw Hats. A common theme in Thriller Bark is this idea of shadows, with Mora's devil fruit power of shadow manipulation serving as the outlet for all of the conflict we see in this arc. But it also has a deeper meaning, as the opponent each Straw Hat faces serves as a dark reflection of themselves. Now, this isn't necessarily a new concept. Most of the time in team-oriented action stories, each member will typically fight the person who matches them both in power level and status. The primary protagonist will typically fight the primary antagonist, the second in command fights the other second in command, and so on and so forth. What's interesting about Thriller Bark is that the crew isn't necessarily matched up against those who are on the same level combat-wise, but more so against those who match them psychologically, and cast a reflection on the kind of of person they could be if they used their skill in evil ways. For example, Chopper and Hogback are both very skilled doctors, but where Chopper uses his medical knowledge to protect and heal those in need no matter what, Hogback uses his expertise to manipulate patients to do his bidding. Absalom serves as a reflection of Sanji's perversion taken to an even darker path, prying and taking advantage of women without their consent. I admit that Sanji's journey in this arc could have been handled with a little more care than it had been, but the concept is there, even if it's not executed the best. I think my personal favorite example of these reflections comes from Perona and Usopp. Where Perona uses her power of negativity to bring others down, Usopp is so inherently negative to the point that not only do her powers not work against him, she actually feels sorry for Usopp and tries to cheer him up. But the relationship between Moria and Luffy is the one I find most fascinating, because Moria isn't a reflection of Luffy if he were to use his abilities for evil. What he represents is Luffy's personal worst case scenario upon entering the New World. Here we have someone who was once a great warrior who completely fell apart after a major defeat, losing his entire crew. His ambition and spirit quickly turned to laziness and spite, preferring to use others to both fulfill his desires and enhance his own power rather than achieving them through personal growth. His paranoia caused him to give up on his dreams and focus instead on ensuring that others won't be able to achieve theirs. The tragedy of Gecko Moria serves as a warning to both Luffy and us on the toll these upcoming threats can have on somebody, and how easily a seemingly unbreakable will can be shattered. In fact, we almost saw this happen with Luffy, both after his crew went missing and the death of Ace. But the strength and unwavering support of the Straw Hats, reminding him of the importance of his dreams and the bonds they share, allowed him to avoid this fate. Thriller Bark is nowhere near perfect, and it pales in comparison to the top tier arcs in the series, but it excels at the one thing I value most in One Piece, and that's quality character interaction and development. The theming is as high quality as you would expect, the comedy is genuinely hilarious, and the fights, in my opinion, don't get the respect they deserve. But the best part of these 48 chapters is being with this crew and seeing how much fun they have being together. Because again, for as great as those monumental moments are, there's something equally as brilliant in simplicity. Moral of the story, don't skip this arc, it's really good. Thanks for watching.